嗨，大家好，我是 Lucy。今天呢，我想给大家带来一个关于语言的演讲。I suppose most of you just understood what I just said, right? Because I'm using Chinese. But what is Chinese? Chinese is a type of language. But what are languages? In my opinion, a language is something that I make from my mouth. It's the movement of my lips and my tongue and my teeth that I'm exhaling air and exhaling air that makes those hisses and puffs that travels through air, hitting your eardrums, triggering your brain cells to make you think of a word. And these words accumulate into phrases, and phrases combine to sentences, and sentences adding together to form context. And that's how all of you understood my speech. But as a person who speaks 2 languages or more than 2 languages, sometimes I face a problem. When I'm speaking in Chinese very fluently and I suddenly switch to English, I feel really weird because Chinese has a complete different grammatical structure from English, which is like the reverse of English. So I feel like my grammar is very weird, and sometimes my word usages are like fixed in Chinese that cannot be translated in English. I believe most polyglots and also like bilinguals have this concern as I am. I feel like I am switching between identities. Well, identity, this word, is not very precise, but it's actually how we perceive reality. So this language and thought has become a worldwide chicken and egg problem for several decades or for centuries. So people think, does language exist before thoughts, like language determines thoughts, or language is just a representation of thoughts? This genius scientist called Benjamin Whorf, he proposed a hypothesis called the Whorf hypothesis, which, in short, linguistic relativity. When he studied the Hopi language, which is a Native American language, he found out that they don't actually have words to describe time. Very fascinating, because we cannot imagine a world where we don't have words to describe time. But how does that link to linguistic relativity? Or how language determines thought? I believe when I am demonstrating this sort of very abstract concept to you, it's difficult to understand, but I will use several concrete perspectives to illustrate. First of all, it's about sight. Visually speaking, recognizing colors is one of the most important features of how we perceive this world. This phone is red, and the fruit is orange, and this car is blue. That's so obvious for English and Chinese speakers because we have words to describe these colors, which is pretty easy. But on the other side of the world, these people living in the Amazon forest called the Pirahas, these people don't actually have words to describe colors. Instead, they use a sort of object to references to another object to describe color. For example, the phone was like blood. The fruit has a color of dawn, and the car was sky-like. That's how they reference to colors. So when they perceive the world as what we think color as a fixed noun or adjective, they think of it as a series of linked events or other objects to references, which is completely different from how we view this world. Take a look at this color. You may take 10 seconds to remember it. Okay, I think time is up. Now, can you precisely point out the color on this color palette? I believe for an English or Chinese speaker, this is very difficult. I cannot do that myself because I just see a bunch of oranges, like light yellow, reddish orange in the middle, and I cannot find that color precisely. However, for the Hindians, this is another native tribe, that their language exists more than 30 times of words to describe colors rather than English. So they will perform this task so easily by seeing this color for not more than 20 seconds, and then pointed it out directly, specifically, and correctly on this color palette. They have distinctive words to describe each color as what we say might be light orange, dark orange, reddish orange, brownish orange, yellowish orange, or whitish orange somehow. They have distinctive words, and that helps them to recognize different colors. So this is how language helps them to recognize a more wide variety of colors. Moving on to senses. Language doesn't only affect how we see this world, but also how we feel it. This is a picture of snow. As usually Chinese and English speakers, we see snow. We sometimes feel it's cold snow, or it's soft snow, it's hard snow, it's firm snow, it's mushy snow, it's wet snow, it's dry snow. But for the Inuits, look, these words are completely different words of describing each stage of snow or each type of snow, which helps them to recognize different textures. When they see snow, they see different segments or different types specifically to each type that when we see as a general type of thing that just varies a little between each other. So they feel it as a completely different thing, which how they feel the world through snow is completely different from our perspective. And coming deeper into cognition. How many apples are here? 5, obviously. I believe most people, if you learned primary school math, you can do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It's so easy for English and Chinese speakers to recognize the number of apples on this picture as we can count from 1 to 5 easily. But for the Pirahas, again, they have the most complex form of language existing among 7,000 languages in this world. They don't have words to describe numbers. So they have no words to describe numbers doesn't mean that they cannot account for things. But they don't have concepts of complicated math or algebra or going down deeper about calculus. So they don't have complex cognition on math. And this language that they're using actually blocks their way of spreading the idea of math between each other, because how they account for things is by differentiating one word for several tones, which is not working as the same mechanism in English or Chinese. So in this way, that their recognition of language or math through their culture is completely different. They cannot spread the idea of math easily because they don't have the words to describe it. Simply put, this bridge we're seeing is just a bridge. But for Spanish speakers, bridge, this word is feminine. So when they think of bridge, it is usually described as elegant, beautiful, soft, or flexible as words to describe females. But for German speakers, bridge is masculine. So when German speakers see a bridge, they think of it as strong, durable, long, and supportive as words to describe male characters, which means that two different speakers of different languages see this same bridge as two different types and exist two different characteristics. I believe most of you see this bridge as a bridge, but these people speaking Spanish and speaking German see this bridge as a total different characteristic as what we are seeing right now. Furthermore, talking about culture, as what I have said about the Pirahas spreading math across their culture. Language do affects culture because culture is art, it's experiences, it's beliefs, it's religion, it's how this whole identity views the world. And in the meantime, language affects how they see this world. So it actually affects culture. Take an example of ancient Chinese society. In ancient Chinese society, the ancient Chinese is very, very difficult to learn because it has different distinctive nouns for each object, which is very different from modern Chinese. So that the literacy rate at that time was pretty low. So the society recognized language as a difficult thing to learn. So they view people that know how to speak this language and know how to write this language, or literacy people, as different people as what we are considering right now. So they view the word education completely differently in Chinese society. As what our values, that it is very simple to have education. But in ancient Chinese society, with the difficulty of language, education becomes difficult. So they have a complete concept of difference on education comparing now. So when I'm talking about scope, I usually talk about time. This is the Hopi tribe, which I have discussed in the first part of my speech about Benjamin Worth's experiment. This tribe of people, in their language, they don't have words to describe time. What they're doing is by linking a series of religious events or some events happening into something of their time scale, which means that they don't have a specific time period like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, but instead they have a logically linked sort of events of a logic chain of describing a time period. So in their case, time is logic, but in our case, time is just a moment. So this is completely different from what we are viewing this world, that their language of describing time and what they're thinking of logically expressing time is not going to be the same for our society. Now let's talk about the concept of linguistic relativity. I have an example of a person called Ricky Duval. He is a speaker of Cherokee, and his whole family spoke Cherokee. Everyone spoke Cherokee around him in his community. His sister, his mother, his father all spoke Cherokee. But when he entered kindergarten in 1970s in the United States, the teacher told him to stop speaking Cherokee and speak English instead. So the loss of Cherokee in his generation is caused by these people mandatorily thinking to let him speak English. Why? This is because of linguistic relativity. How do I illustrate this? Some other speakers of languages think their way of speaking or their language has a modernized or superior type of way of perceiving this world comparing to native languages. So they want to eliminate them, to put their superiority in this world and to delete those sort of inferiorism. But is that correct? I believe that is not. Each language and each different kind of speaking is a different way of how we reach to the world. It's a unique mindset of perceiving reality. What is more amazing is that there are more than 7,000 of different mindsets existing in this world. However, the pessimistic side is that more than 2,900, which is 41%, is endangered. And more than 90% of those are going to be extinct in the next 100 years. So think of that. The ancestors of ours put their life of effort into the crystal of this way to put on ours to reach to the world is now being endangered. And so what we're trying to do is to preserve them, to appreciate them, because each language is a different way of how people reach the world. It's an artistic and beautiful way of how we perceive reality. Thank you for listening.